928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Stumbling down the road with Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff as she carries stones, digs holes, and wheels her shovels on her way. This road is the real path. It is never easy and never clear, but always entertaining. This journey has not been a seated event, as Bridgette walks, runs, stumbles, carries, digs, drags, laughs, fights, sings, prays, dances, kicks, screams, and oftentimes falls.
Hey everybody, it's Bridgette Lyn Dolgoff, and you are listening to Saturday's Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And remember, we are 100% listener supported. So you can go to our website, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And you can scroll around till you find the funding page, and you can go ahead and, if you want to just make a donation, we have heirloom seeds. We have all kinds of amazing things that, and varieties that you can actually help our network. So everybody here at Revolution Radio, all the hosts and all the people who are working behind the scene to keep our network on and keep our hosts and everything rolling, we do it all voluntarily so that we can bring you information and news or talk to you about things that, you might not hear anywhere else. So I help, my network by paying for archives, which are $6 a month. And also I advertise my online healthcare on a nice advertising banner on our website. So you too can find all kinds of different ways to support Revolution Radio. And so today is the Saturday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. Also, this next week will be the third week that I'll also be on Wednesdays, the Wednesdays edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes. And both of my shows are in Studio A on Revolution Radio. And they both are at different times. So Wednesday is at noon Eastern time to 2 p.m. Eastern. And then Saturdays we're at 1 p.m. Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern. So anyway, today I'm pretty excited. I have one of my favorite return guests, the amazing and talented and inspiring Stephen Smith. And he has been on my show before, and he is the master of the seeds. The native seeds, has the largest collection in the world of native seeds, and he's traveled to locations and worked with indigenous people and learned all kinds of stories and medicine and all kinds of things, seeds. And so we have him on today. So are you there? Hello.
I am here, Bridgette.
Awesome. And I always tell people, he's only 20. What are you, only 22? You haven't gotten to 23 yet, right?
Not yet. In another couple months, I'll be 23.
Yeah, so he like really inspires me. I wish, I'm 50, but I wish, when I was back that young, I would have had, all the information that he does. So anyway, super inspiring. So I was excited to have you on my show. This summer, I'm doing wild crafting plant medicine. So last year, I got to grow some native seeds that came to me. And then this year, now I'm out in the field looking at plants and, watching their relationships. And also, I'm going to be collecting a whole bunch of seed plants and, be able to collect a lot of them so that I can take them out into areas. One of the things I've noticed is a lot of the fire areas kind of up in the hills, the mountains outside of Reno, like lower than the Lake Tahoe Basin. There aren't a lot of plants that are growing. There may be like 4 or 5 species because nobody's actually gone in there and, done some seed broadcasting. So this year I'm going to focus in on trying to collect some of the seeds of the plants that I'm working with so that I have stuff to broadcast in other areas to get, more relationships going.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about it kind of before that all seeds are kind of indigenous seeds, right? That utilizing seeds from wherever else to try to keep them alive is a good thing. Instead of some of this thought process, like we can only grow these seeds because these are the native seeds that were grown here. I think we covered that in a couple shows ago where, a lot of these seeds were brought up from South America and other places long before. Are you there? You're going to help me out?
Yeah. Yeah, there's... I'm watching the hummingbirds dart back and forth right now. So I'm kind of I'm distracted, so I'm sorry. This is how you know you're a nature freak, when you're watching the hummingbirds dart back and forth and totally zoned out.
Right, you're like totally spaced out.
I think it might have been the last show. We talked about it. I know. A lot of stuff was brought in from Central and South America. Please don't hit me in the head, hummingbirds. And there's not really, the term native is really, at least with food plants, it's like, well, what's really a native food plant? Because almost everything that we know that we love and adore today, peppers, corn, beans, squash, all of that kind of came from Central and South America. Not really anything that was truly native to North America, or at least the United States. Cucurbita pepo squash was, because it was domesticated here and in Mexico independently. But the term native is used very loosely, I guess, is a way to put it. And we need to broaden our thinking on that, because in that fire area there where you are near Reno, that should have hundreds of species that should have come back by now. There's dozens of hundreds of species of plants that are the first pioneer species that inhabit communities like that, or there should be. When the fires hit deeper south here in my home state of Tennessee here in the mountains and everything, when those horrible fires were, there were hundreds of species that popped up right after that because that's their job. That's what they do. But the term native should be used a little bit more broadly than what it is. We have a mindset that it's only stuff from here, and like you said, we should only grow this here. Well, we've been growing stuff that is not native here for hundreds of thousands of years. So it depends on what you want to define that as meaning, I guess.
Yeah, well, kind of being inspired and working on, like large scale, land restoration areas, and being out in the field, and I don't get paid for any of this stuff. I just take what I have and I go out and I look and I collect plants. And last year I got to grow some native plants from like India, right? And I really fell in love with sorghum, which is really came from Africa, which is kind of reminds me of sort of like corn, you know, some of the sorghums and how they grow. But I really fell in love with sorghum. It was just beautiful. It was like this really amazing plant that, you know, nature really liked. And I thought about like, you know, we have to repopulate and restore areas where we need something a little bit hardier. You know, sorghum could be planted in a really good way, and it has these beautiful seeds, and animals love the seeds, and just the way that it grows, it's super hardy. It's grown in, you know, tough climates, and just a lot of, you know, different seeds, like even a lot of the South American like corn seeds that are drought resistant, and a lot of these things. I have to think hard because I'm in the desert, you know, so when I'm thinking about repopulating areas or trying to help areas heal, I have to work a little bit harder, you know, what's going to survive, you know, in the heat, you know. But this year, one of the plants that I found, it was another plant from Africa. So I guess I have this, you know, plant African connection. This plant that I really fell in love with this year that I found, that I started working with, is the teasel. You know, have you ever seen teasel? It has like a tall stalk. Yeah. It has these really like, you know, prickly leaves that grow. Survival use it for, you know, water will collect in the leaf, you know, next to the stalk. And then it grows these big heads with these beautiful flowers on it. Well, it turns out that, you know, I'm getting ready to do a Bach flower remedy from it because it's just getting ready to flower, and it helps heal brokenness, right? That's what the flower remedy helps with. But I've been watching the teasel plant the whole year, and like, just, it's taught me a lot about life, you know, and how to stand strong against, you know, the elements and the odds and the forces and all these other things. And I'm going to be using the teasel root because it actually cures Lyme disease. And other type of parasitic, autoimmune system diseases. And what it does is it goes into, so I'm making tincture out of the root. And then it goes into the tissues. So you have to be really careful about the amounts that you use. And what it does, it heats up the tissues, the deep tissues, and it forces the parasitic, you know, type viral, bacterial, parasitic stuff up to the bloodstream so that the body can identify it in the bloodstream and start eliminating it. So that's kind of like how it works. So it's a very, you know, it's a formidable plant. It has like some pretty heavy medicine, but it comes from Africa. And I think to myself, you know, one of those spiritual kind of philosophies is that, you know, we have this crazy Lyme disease in America, you know, in North America. And maybe this plant, you know, came as a result, right? And it had to come from another continent, but it was like called, you know, like if you work kind of more on the kind of the spiritual energetic level, that you can't really say a plant, you can't use that plant to the area, because if it's called to that area and it's growing in that area, it should be utilized because it has something that area needs, whether it's the insects, the soil, the people, the water, kind of a thought process. Do you have any thoughts about that? I know you have lots of thoughts about that.
Yeah. We have teasel all around here. There's a lot of it up in the north where I moved to, around Pennsylvania. It grows all over the roadsides and around bridges and everything. And it was just starting to bloom when I flew home yesterday too. And the colonists used to use the dried seed heads as combs because they're rough and they're pretty sturdy, unlike sunflower seed heads. But they would use them as combs and to tease the wool of sheep and everything when they would be making yarn or clothes or something, to kind of tease out the knots and everything, hence why it's called teasel. But I always tell people that provided we don't drive all plant life to extinction on this planet at the rate we're going. There is a plant in the world that can cure every disease, every sickness, every illness that man faces. We were giving everything we needed as a natural medicine millennia ago when life evolved on this planet. So I fully believe that there's something that can cure everything in the world somewhere. It may not be here in North America like this teasel, but there's a plant somewhere in the world that can cure anything. And teasel just happens to be native to the Asian continent, to parts of Africa, and it's usually considered a very bad weed here, or it's grown as a flower. But I think the mindset of a lot of people is that, well, it's just a flower. That's all it is. I just want to grow it to make cut flowers or to make my garden look pretty. When a lot of this stuff has had amazing medicinal value and properties for thousands of years. And I think that's starting to come back now, I think, a little bit, but we don't give plants enough credit. I also think in that they have to survive in this really chaotic climate changing world just as we do, but they can't up and walk around like we do. So there's a plant somewhere in the world that can cure everything. And it's just a matter of us finding it and figuring out how is the best way, what can it cure, and everything like that. It's just a matter of us paying attention instead of just being so one-minded that, oh, it's a garden flower. Well, that's all it's used for. All of the stuff that we grow at Roughwood, where I work, it's beautiful, but you can also eat it, and you can also turn it into medicine. It's kind of a multi-use plant, multi-use system, and that's part of all the reason why we try to keep all of this stuff alive, is because it's not just edible, or even eating it can be considered a medicine. I have a plant that was actually introduced to India, where it now has a local name, or it's had a local name for a few centuries. But it is native to Mexico and parts of Central America. And I'm sure everyone is familiar with the pretty flowers called cosmos. And this is a wild species of cosmo, native to the Americas. And the leaves and the flowers are used in salads. They are considered, I was reading some of the scientific studies that was done on this plant, I think a couple years ago. It is considered one of the most healthy salad greens you can ever consume. It is used in Indian medicine over there. It is a powerful anti-microbial, antifungal. I think they even said it can help regulate blood sugar for people that have diabetes. And the list just kept going on and on. The thing is full of so many nutrients that in most things we eat, it doesn't even have anymore. And it's plants like that I'm sure the native people in Mexico and Central America knew, but that knowledge might have been lost or forgotten, and it made its way to another country, and then it became a very significant portion of the diet and a very sacred medicinal plant as well, which is what often happens. Marigolds, jade species, African marigolds, they had a similar thing happen when they made it to India. They became sacred. They were already sacred here, but they became sacred and used in medicines and everything because they're an antimicrobial, antibiotic as well. But yeah, it's a fascinating, very fascinating thing to realize that not everything we have that may be used to treat something like Lyme disease here in the U.S. may not even be a plant from here. It could be a plant from like teasel, like Africa, or it could be from this tiny little island in the middle of the ocean, that's the only place this thing grows, which is all the more reason to preserve it.
Yeah, no, after the last, conversation, I think last show we talked about, the need for a lot of these species to be, collected, and people grow and take care of them. And this is the thing is, so just for the average people out there, a hybrid, say St. John's wort, which is more kind of ornamental, has big yellow flowers on it. It's really pretty. But it doesn't have any medicinal value in it, like, say, the wild type of St. John's wort. And this is what's really sad. In Nevada, St. John wort has been pretty hard to find. I'll find like one or two sprigs here and there, but because Nevada is a major cattle place, dairy and meat cows, and alfalfa, they work really hard on, it's like the number one, what they consider weed, that they remove and, ban. Like, you can't even, like, it's like illegal to transport any kind of wild St. John's wort across the Nevada-California borders.
Yeah, it's really sad.
And this is a plant that has, like, probably one of the most powerful pain relievers in it. And not only that, but it can actually help to regenerate nerves. And it's like eradicated, from the wild. And so these are reasons why. So if you have a plant out there, you have to be careful. Is it an heirloom? Is it more of an indigenous seed? And paying attention to that to make sure that, if you do plant some of this stuff and you cultivate it in your yard to save species, that you're getting the real, the older seed, and the seed that actually has all the medicine in it, instead of the ornamentals that have been created, to put into our yards. And I think, yeah. So I got to tell you this quick story, because I know you know everything about seeds, right? Because there hasn't been a seed that you have ever said no to. That's what you said once.
Well, there has. I've had to stop myself, because I'm at a point where, what am I going to do with all of this stuff? But I tell myself that, and yet someone's like, hey, do you want this? Yes, give it to me. Wait, I don't need that. Here, let me have it anyway. I can't say no. That's the problem.
Yeah, I love that about you. We need more people on the ground, that can't say no to a seed and want to help it and learn from it and watch it grow. So during the course of this herbal medicine program, we go out on these walks through certain kinds of different climate zones and areas in the Sierra Nevadas, which is good because it's my area. So it helps me to figure out what kind of plants I can utilize for medicine, the plants that want to work with me. Actually, it turns out that I can't say no to a plant because they all want to work with me, just like you. You can't say no to a seed. Yeah. I go out and I hear screaming, no me, no me, no me. I'm like, no, I'm just here for one of you, not all of you. Today, I just have to get this work done. I know. So
pick me.
Exactly. No, sometimes they're yelling, and they're just like, okay, I'm just here for one. I'll put you on the schedule. You'll be on the next. We'll get you booked in. So, but anyway, I got to go out with this guy, and I forget what his full name is, but Grayson, I think it's his last name or his first name. I can't remember, but he's native. And I guess he's kind of sort of famous on the West Coast. But what he does is, with his tribe in Northern California, in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, he does cultural land restoration, and through, storytelling and things like that. And he took us through this area, and I can't remember what the area's name was. Gold Creek or something like that, but it to his people, it's small, but they call it a climax forest area that's been fixed with a lot of their traditional plants and everything else, and that when it becomes a climax forest, it doesn't really need anything else to help it anymore. And one of the things that he said that I just really got to have a conversation with him after he took us through, he led us through the climax forest, and he talked about how women made skirts, his people made skirts out of like some of the tree bark. that, like Pepsi Cola rated one of the most important, at least on the West Coast, native plants that they used for medicine and tea, which was, I think, called Pepsisui or something like that, which is almost like Pepsi.
Yeah.
And they still raid forests today illegally for it, because it's not the same when you monoculture it, changes the chemistry and the flavor. So they still are out raiding, different indigenous areas and forests. But anyway, the thing that was amazing to me was that he was talking about how in the future, one of the things that he talks about and he tries to teach the little kids is that we need a Pangea of plants. He said, just like, some of these native stories and stuff talk about how in the future, all people of all colors will work together. The rainbow people will step forward, and the indigenous people will teach all the people, about the things that they need to learn and, help to save the planet. And he said, it's just like that we're going to need all the plants from the entire world, and that this Pangea of these plants would need to come together in order to heal a lot of the planet. That they, just like the food that we eat, we need the different plants to actually work together to bring out the best in each other, to really activate and really heal areas. And then one of the things that he said was that, they don't have to worry, because once that forest area has gotten the relationships with the plants that it wants to work with, the water and everything else is included. He said then what happens is that it stops being a transitional forest where it needed a lot of these plants, and it starts to push out the more evasive ones, or the ones that are not necessary, out to the outside areas, because they don't need them anymore. So he said, like, the forest will almost get rid of the transitional plants, even if they're evasive. But there's a reason why that plant was evasive for a while. And I was like, it's like nature is just so unbelievably cool. It's like if you just help it a little bit or work with it a little bit, I mean, nature can do some pretty amazing things. I mean, way more than what we're doing. I mean, by far. But what do you think about that, about the Pangea of plants? I mean, we're kind of been talking about that coming together. We're bridging plants from all over in an effort to save them, rescue them, and get them to work with each other, right? So what are your thoughts about some of that?
I mean, it makes perfect sense, because at one point, all of the continents were together as Pangea, and they all shared the same plant life at one point too. So it's really a fascinating idea in the sense that he said that, because I mean, I fully agree with him. I think we are going to have to unite with each other, dissolve our political ideas, dissolve our monetary issues, and work together as a societal species, which humans have always been, with the environment, with each other, with the water, with the land, with everything. And we all need to basically recreate a form of Pangea, not only with plants, but with ourselves as a species, and kind of start to restore the balance that we've severely upset over the past few hundred years and thousands of years. And a lot of these plants have been introduced to other parts of the world, and insects as far as that goes too, and animals. And some of them, where they come from, they're an endangered species where they come from. But here, when they're introduced to, like, the United States, where they become one of the most invasive species that is known to modern science. But in their natural ecosystem, they have all these predators and things that keep them at bay, that keep the population under control. And I look at that as not only fact, but when a plant is introduced into a very bad situation, an invasive plant such as kudzu that we have here in the South, or a plant that was brought in from Europe as a flower that took over the wetlands of the United States for purple loosestrife, they are considered extremely invasive, and they are. But they can also be used to treat some of the most abused land, abused soil, abused environments. And once that ecosystem is restored back to its natural balance, it and Mother Nature will basically take away that invasive species. People always think I'm the most crazy person in the world, and when I say, well, Mother, she keeps tallies of what goes on in the world. She knows what's growing where. She knows what was planted where. And if that balance can ever be restored, then she'll kick in and resolve any of the invasive species problems we have around the nation, around the world too. If we keep destroying that same ecosystem and that particular weed or whatever it is keeps growing, well, then that area is just not healed yet. And until it is healed, that invasive species is going to end up suffering. Or, well, not the invasive species will suffer, that ecosystem will continue to suffer. But there are cases where a perfectly viable ecosystem is invaded by an invasive species, and it does become a significant problem. But I see stuff like invasive species more so as a more powerful healant for the places in the world where they're not native to. Because I think, in a sense, they kind of realize what's going on, and they just rapidly reproduce themselves in order to try to survive, but also fix the imbalance that I believe all plants and all life can feel.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think more and more I see that. And so, the question now, when I see something that's invasive or people want to have an argument with me, with what's invasive, I always ask them, ask the first question, why are you here? Lead an investigation of that plant and to figure out, why are you here? What would be your best purpose? For example, we have these problems with sheetgrass, in the desert. We never really had this kind of grass, but now it grows everywhere. And, I was reading up on it, and it's kind of a powerful plant. I mean, the guy who studied it and tried to figure out how to change its genetics and eradicate it for 25 years, reported that one day he just went into the lab and it looked totally different, and they did some testing on it and it returned itself back to its original DNA that they started splicing 25 years prior. Now that's pretty powerful. So, it used to annoy me with the sheetgrass, and then, in the mainstream they talk about how it's like a major fire hazard and all this other stuff, and I'm thinking, but for thousands and thousands of years, this area burned itself, right? Maybe it worked with other forces and periodically, burned itself, returned itself so that the new seeds could grow or whatever else. So maybe the sheetgrass is here because it's an accelerant. It's not our fault. It's not, the land's fault or the plant's fault that the humans have taken up a huge part of their ebb and flow, how they would manage and heal themselves. And now they have to call in we call them spirits, the spirit of sheetgrass, and sheetgrass then moved in physically, to help with a problem. So why are you here? Maybe to actually help fires, to heal the area. I don't know. So that's kind of like where my thinking goes now, especially after the summer being in the field a lot. Is, why are you here? Why is that plant here? And it isn't because it's invasive. It's because it's there because it serves a purpose. And, there's this funny story. So these friends live in kind of this, above middle class neighborhood. And they all, had pretty nice yards, blah, 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 blah. And the guy across the street, the only thing that would grow in his yard is mullein. I mean, thousands of mullein plants. So my friend is like, oh, that guy across the street, that guy never takes care of his yard or maintains his yard. And look at that. What is that stuff anyway? And I looked at him and I said, does the guy have lung disease? And my friend looked at me and said, I don't know. So he talks to his wife. He said, what did that guy say that's wrong with him? She goes, oh, he has lung cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, that's why
Uh-huh.
the mullein is growing in his yard, because the mullein is actually trying to save his life, but nobody understands what the plant is trying to do or say. I mean, the plant's literally growing there to help you with your lungs. And that's all the
Yeah,
top part of the
exactly.
plant does, and so it cracks me up, like how even so plants are reaching out to people and go exactly where they're needed, and literally are like, trying to save our lives. And we just so don't get it. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's just my
I think a lot of people they're too narrow-minded. They're not open-minded enough. I think if the world was open-minded, we wouldn't be in the chaos that we're currently suffering. But I don't know. People seem to forget and don't really realize that regardless of what religion you are or what your ideals may be, creation itself was sacred. It is sacred. All life is sacred. And we're all related in the end. All humans are related. We're related to plants and mushrooms and everything like that too. We all came from the same ancestors. So everything on this earth is our brother and sister and cousins and all of that. And those of us that are open-minded enough and that know this and recognize this, the plants pick up on it. They know, and even if people aren't always open to it, if the plants care enough, then they will show up like that neighbor that has all that mullein. The plants recognize he's sick. They know he's sick, and so it's just it'll come up like that. And I think if people realize this more, I think things would be less convoluted in what we think and what we believe and what we see the natural world as. Basically, most of nature is like one big pharmacy, a natural pharmacy, because that's all we've ever had. That's all we need. We don't need all this synthetic stuff and the synthetic mindset that we put ourselves into does not help us reconnect to our roots as being part of the web of life. We're not our own web of life. We think we are, but we're not. We're part of the bigger picture. We're part of Mother's picture. So, anyway, me spouting about my nonsense.
No, that's why I like you on my shows. I love your nonsense. Being kind of a woman and kind of having and I'm sure that men, to a considerable point can say the same thing, but there's in a world where it's pretty much male, patriarchal systems, sometimes I think it's easier to, identify with a father or whatever else feminine. But it wasn't until I really started, really embracing mother, right? And that just because I had a bad situation with maybe some of the women in my life or my mother, and I reached out and started to have a new relationship with like the earth and nature and that mother who looks after us and takes care of us, did my whole idea of my role as a woman completely change. And just, what I really wanted to do, which was be in nature all the time and looking at plants and seeds and all these other things, and learning, what those different plants have to offer. Because, the other thing too that I've really learned this summer in particular is how plants teach you certain things, like for example, teasel. Teasel has taught me a lot about having a strong structure, standing up, against all things, those forces of standing up in a very confident, sure way. And it's also taught me that I can also have boundaries, the little prickly things on it, that it's okay for me to be a little prickly, in my boundaries and how I'm dealing with things on the planet. So the plants actually teach you a lot of other things too. I mean, which I'm sure you know about as well. Do you ever have any stories of maybe one of the most profound things a plant has taught you, or a seed?
I need to start writing this stuff down. It's actually what I need to do. I tell myself that all the time. And do I ever do it? No. I have 4,000 notebooks with other stuff written in it, and I don't write the stuff I should be writing down. There's a couple things that come to mind. I am in the process of writing, amongst other things, of course, working on a book on Central and South American based shamanism that is centered around corn and the other three sisters, but primarily corn. And I really didn't have a interest in writing such a book, I guess I'm going to call it, until I started getting into corn really, really deep, like I have been. And there is a corn that is from the highlands of Guatemala called Negro de Chimoltenango, Black of Chimoltenango. It is a solid black corn that is used to make tortillas and beer and other foods and drinks that the Highland Maya use. And I finally acquired some pure seed of it because it is very rare. It is not grown very much down there anymore, from what I've heard. And I finally got some pure seed of it here a couple years ago. And ever since I held it, I've been obsessed with that corn. Even if I don't grow anything else, I'll plant this corn. And because it is from Guatemala, I may not get seed. I may not get a tassel, and I may not get ears. It's not always guaranteed because of that. But I've been planting it straight up for like 3 or 4 years now. And I planted it this year in Pennsylvania. And the plants are about 18 feet tall. They have the most beautiful tassels on them. The tassels and the anthers are purple. And I actually have ears this time. And not only has the climate shifted rather severely, but I've gotten more and more into writing this book. And I didn't even realize it until one of my other friends up there, she's like, well, you know the reason why you're obsessed with that corn? She's like, because the title that you chose for this book on shamanism has black maize in it. And she's like, this is basically kind of your patron corn to write this entire book. So that's one of the funky stories I have. Of course, it's corn related. Go figure. And I didn't even think about that until she mentioned it. And then it made sense to me. And with the Cherokee blood that I have in me, and just the very deep respect I have for Mother and all of her children and everything, it has given me another aspect of looking at that black corn, not only as basically the patron for me to write this book, but I can feel there is another lesson that this corn wants to teach me. I can feel it, but I don't know what it is. The time hasn't come for it to really teach me that yet. But I know it's like pending approval or something. Maybe it's pending Mother's approval. I don't know. but I can just sense and feel that there is another lesson there that is waiting for me to be learned and to see. And I guess when the right time comes, it'll come out. And of course, before I got into actual heirloom seed, like I work with, I was a botany major originally. So I was and still am obsessed with plants. And I was collecting a lot of the really rare endangered species from around here, from around home here. And I had amassed a pretty decently large collection of a lot of these really rare things that I have a sunflower. I'm walking around the garden here now. I have a sunflower here that was only found in about maybe half a dozen counties here in Tennessee and Kentucky and parts of Alabama. So it was listed federally with the Fish and Wildlife Service under the Endangered Species Act to be protected. I have another sunflower that was actually added to the endangered species list about a year or two right after I wrote the very same thing in the first novel I published. And they're blooming here now. They just started blooming. The butterflies are all in them. And now that I kind of look at it, all of these really rare species, they come from very, very, very isolated ecosystems, very specific habitats, very specific regions, right down to, like, you can even pinpoint some of these to their GPS locations. And before I started to really get into heirlooms and develop my spiritual way of thinking now, I was like other people my age. I was looking at the broad picture. I really didn't pay attention to the details that really mattered. And now after we were talking, it kind of hit me that the reason why I was into all these endangered species is because they're very detail specific of where they grow, what they need to grow. And that is what kind of switched my outlook on life and my respect for Mother, that I now look at the details more closely. I look at the more isolated ideas, maybe the revolutionary ideas in some senses that I often have. And it's like a plant taught me this. I didn't read it in a book. I didn't hear it on the TV. I didn't hear it on the radio. I definitely didn't hear it in college. It's like a plant taught me this. And most Native people and people like you and I, we understand that. We're open to that, and it'll happen. So plants are an amazing teacher, and there's a lot of decorum that I have that when I hopefully get this book finished, each one usually has a specific message that it can teach someone. And that's basically what I'm doing. I'm trying to grow all of these, analyze their messages, and compile it into a book that someone can use if they're maybe having relationship problems or deep emotional problems, because I have depression and anxiety, and gardening has been a way that I've dealt with it. It says herbal medicine, and there's specific plants and specific corns that you can grow that can help you deal with your anxiety, that can teach you to have a different outlook on life. And basically any problem you have, there's usually a plant in the world that can help teach you to control it, to get rid of it, whatever like that. That's the amazing thing with life on this planet, is that we're all interconnected. We just have to open our minds and realize it and accept it, and then the life will teach us what we may not see at that point. Maybe that makes sense. I feel like I'm just spouting off nonsense.
Nope. We'd love your nonsense. Don't worry about that part. Yeah, no, I feel like, I went back to, I've been in alternative medicine. I've had private practice for a long time, traditional osteopath. I specialize in types of nutrient that a lot of people don't even know exist. I call them silent nutrients, like microbes. um,
Yeah.
and then now, I'm like finally, I've been, dealing with plants, but I remember when I went back to school for biodynamics and I went to Steiner College in Sacramento, and coming out of that, Steiner's approach, Steiner can be a little culty from the modern sense of the people that are involved in it. And I will not hesitate to say that because it is pretty true and it is fact. That's why I'm not involved in those community movements. But his work with plants and, like the spiritual and physical and related approach with plants, whether you're eating them or you're dealing with the soil, or whatever else. I really felt when I went through that program that it saved my life at that point in time. And then, I've gone through different things with plants. Last year when all those native seeds got sent to me and I grew that corn, I feel like it opened up doorways that weren't available to me before. And that, I was asking this today before our show, I was asking Spirit today, I'm like, so I tried to get into an herbal medicine program, starting in 2004. And it wasn't until this summer that I finally got into one. All kinds of reasons why, they didn't work out or I couldn't get into them or blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, okay, well, I feel like they put the cart before the horse. Because you made me grow the native seeds last year, which I've been growing a lot of stuff and farming and doing biodynamic healing and soil regeneration and all this other stuff and consulting. And so, but I said, then you brought the native plants and then you had me go to herbal school this year. It's like, I feel like that cart before the horse should have been, I go to herbal school and then you send me the native seeds. And I realize, having this conversation, is that, the seeds, the corn specifically, that corn that I grew, had to fix the soil, and then it had to come up through the soil, right? So it had to bring me through, my enclosed mind and get me to sprout, and bringing me through all that emotional stuff, because it was heavy. I had that when I grew that corn last year. It was heavy. It was something barely that I could deal with and move through the metamorphosis of growing the corn and how it was communicating with me and how it was changing me and how it was teaching me things. I mean, it literally made the two other people on the property crazy. They fought day and night until finally one of them left, and then the other guy was still spun out of control until I took all the corn down. It was finished and I took the stalks down. And so I realize now, dealing with the herbal plants, is like, now the corn is sending me out into the environment, right? And having me craft medicine, which is like really starting to understand the plant, the root, the stalk, the leaf, the flower, and the different kinds of medicines that it can be used for. And so I really start to understand the pollen, being used ceremonially and as medicine. And one of my Paiute teachers said that, the corn, the real corn medicine has the highest vibration of anything on the planet. And that's why it needs to be kept in a good way, because it can heal everything.
I agree. And I tell people this, and of course they look at me like, are you taking something? And I'm like, are you taking something? But yeah, and this is why I tell people to be careful with what you grow and how you grow it, because the vibrations that we put out, the plants read, the plants absorb, and you'll end up cultivating a vibration that if you plant a corn when you're very upset, well, that corn is going to maintain that anger or resentment, whatever it may be that you had when you planted it. And the Pawnee people and some of the other tribes that I have some of their sacred seed of, it is always said to never plant seed of anything, especially corn and beans and squash, when you're upset, when you're emotionally distraught or anything, because that will carry over. And you'll end up growing stuff that will feed off with that or put off that energy, and you end up causing more problems than you want to solve. So corn especially has a very high vibration because it has been the sustenance of the human species since its evolution. At least in the Americas. For people in parts of Europe, it would be like wheat and barley, because it's just as sacred.
Hey, Stephen, can you hold that thought? We're in 5 minutes of commercials, so we won't be able to hear them, but you can mute and take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back at 1 after. But keep that thought, because I want you to continue on with that when we come back.
Perfect.
We're out. Commercial. Be back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
From the astral realms to the physical plane, the halls of power to the walls of home, the multiverse to the innerverse, all will be haunted by the ghost in the machine. I am Steve Zerloff, the ghost in the machine. Mondays, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Studio B. Exclusively here on Revolution.Radio.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey, everybody. Hey, whoever's helping me with this studio commercials. I got a little feedback. All right, so, okay, hold on a second. Let's see, I'm not really sure how to, let's try this. Oh, there we go. It's all good. Okay. So anyway, it just kind of like drives I really appreciate whoever helped me with the studio commercials so that I could actually hear them. I super, super appreciate that, whoever you may be. But the feedback is kind of a little bit crazy when you come back on. But anyway, hey, you're on your second hour on the Saturday version of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We are 100% listener supported, so please go to our funding page on our website and see all the different amazing ways that you can fund us. Today, we're in the second hour with the same guest, which is Stephen Smith. And he is just amazing. I just love having him on my show. And just, you know, he would be allowed to come on whenever he felt like it. Monthly. He could give us the monthly report if he wanted to, but I know he's super busy. Do you want to, before we go into what you're talking about, do you want to tell people where to find you or give a plug for your guys' heirloom seeds and your native seeds and give a plug for all that? Give a plug for your book? What do you want to give a plug for to the public?
Mm-hmm. We will probably be carrying the stuff that I write on our website. I work for the Roughwood Seed Collection in Pennsylvania, but we are reorganizing currently as a new nonprofit called the Roughwood Table. Basically, heritage foods from heritage heirloom seed. We're educational, so we basically will be teaching people how to grow their own food, preserving the stories and the culture associated with the seed during the whole process, grow their own food and how to cook it and preserve the seed and the stories and all of that. So you can find us at www.roughwoodtable.org. My Instagram is at Maize, M-A-I-Z-E, Shaman, S-H-A-M-A-N. I don't post that much because I'm doing 5,000 other things as usual. I should be like 30 different people, but I'm one person doing all of that. And then I am also on Facebook. I believe my username, or my page name, whatever you want to call it, is White Wolf 96, W-H-T-E, Wolf 96 or something like that. It's a picture. My profile picture is me in corn or holding corn or something, so it's easy to find me.
Yeah, and
also a lot of the books.
Yeah, and also you have another Facebook page, which is Seed Preservation.
Yeah, Sophie,
it's kind of more group.
Preservation Independence. Which we will be, that organization will be shifting over into Roughwood. I'm probably just going to merge them together. At some point, though, there will be a separate organization, I guess, in a sense, that I am still putting together it's specifically for my corn collection. And I'm still working on it, and hopefully the website will go up next year. hopefully. But it'll all be linked all together, and I'll be promoting it on my social media and everything like that. So we'll get there, I guess, when I get there.
Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, I love seed preservation. I mean, what it is right now, because people show what they're growing. and
Yeah.
Stephen, he puts his 2 cents in periodically on there as well. So you get some really good stories and beautiful tidbits about certain seeds and seeds you've never seen before. And then people will post photos of them growing it and after it's grown. So it's pretty cool. It's a really cool page, actually. I really like it because it's fun. It's seeing people, in action, right, and watching them change, and yeah, it's pretty intense. So before we left, you were talking about different kinds of Native people and understandings around, you never want to plant seed or handle a lot of the really powerful, plants, when you're in a bad way. So do you want to continue talking about that, and then maybe even talk about the other side of it? What is a good, where should you be if you're interacting with these seeds and these plants for the highest good? Maybe too.
Mm-hmm. So basically what I was saying is a lot of the Native knowledge has been passed down to me with various sacred varieties that I've obtained over the course of my seed saving. You don't want to plant really anything, but especially things you're going to grow for food or medicine. When you're in a very bad mindset, if you're really angry, if you're having some kind of rage, if you're severely depressed or emotionally distraught in any way or anything like that, you're not supposed to plant anything like that, because that will carry over not only in the, say, if you're going to cook it, the vegetables you harvest. If you're in a bad mood or something and you plant, say, squash can be bitter sometimes, but if you're bitter when you plant it, you're going to get bitter squash, and that's also toxic too if they're bitter. Or the plants may not grow very well. They may get sickly. They may even die. Or if you're going to use them for medicine, they may end up lacking a specific nutrient or a specific protein or something, enzyme that is in that plant that is used to, say, treat Lyme disease. And that may carry over in that if you plant it when you're upset or something, that it may not have that. It may have too little, may have too much. Basically, the vibrations we give off, the plants will give us back. And that's, of course, up to how we plant it and what we do. That's why I try not to plant anything. I work so much, I'm usually not in a good mood most of the time. So I try to let someone else plant something for me, or I wait till I calm down and go out and do it then. But needless to say, that is also almost a double-edged blade in one sense, in that if you are having a struggle, say with depression or the loss of a loved one, or if you are really angry and have all these questions to the universe of why is this happening to me, why me, I have those all the time. But you can plant a certain seed, whether it be a flower, a vegetable, or a medicinal plant, something that has a connection to whatever problem you might have, or if it's something like anxiety or depression, that kind of disorder, you can find something that is connected to that. Say like planting passion flower or lemon balm, because they're both used to treat anxiety and depression. St. John's wort is too, as is ashwagandha. But you can plant this stuff and grow it, and it'll help teach you solutions of how to control it, to get over it, give you answers that you may be seeking. When I grow corn, that's often what happens. I'll plant corn with a certain question in mind or a certain idea that I may not exactly know how to say, but I'll put all of my intentions, all of that question or that problem in the seed. I'll say a little prayer to the seed and ask that it help me sort out this and this or that and that. And as it grows, I'll end up getting an answer. It won't be immediately. Sometimes I guess it could be. But usually as the plant grows, it'll give you the answers or the help that you may be seeking. So in that sense, it can be good sometimes to be upset or something when you're planting something, but only if you're seeking that guidance of that plant or plants if you're using multiple ones. Corn is really good because it's one of the most deeply tied spiritual plants into human spirituality, the human mind, the human body, and the vibrations are usually nearly equal for corn and humans. Because we created it created us, we cultivate it cultivates us. So it's not always a bad thing to plant it, but you do have to be careful because what you plant and what you put into that, you also get back. So that's why I try to be in a good mind when I plant generally anything, just because I don't want the plant to die or get sick or get mad at me. People think plants can't get mad at you, and they can. So it's kind of it's based on your situation, really, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. But you can use plants to seek answers. A lot of plants were used in divinatory methods. Corn always was. But how you get the answer will depend on your beliefs, how you ask it, if you ask for signs or something. So a lot of it is up to the person planting and asking the questions, which is usually how it often is. But you'll get an answer in some way, some format. You just have to be very open, because the answers are not going to be like you come out and pull back an ear of corn, pull the husk off the corn, and it's written in black and white literally on the cob. You won't get answers like that. It's a very different aspect of answers that you get. And I always enjoy getting those answers because they make you think. They really make you dig deep into your mind and your body and your spirituality and make you think and look at yourself and the world in a different aspect, which is usually a very good thing if we're trying to solve a certain problem with ourselves or whatever else is going on. All stuff I need to write down. It's in my head, but I need to write all of this stuff.
Well, you can always re-listen to the show, and then you can write it all down as you go, right? You can just re-listen to it,
yeah,
and then you'll have it all. So when I have this feeling about plants that I've had since I was a little girl, because I used to eat everything I wasn't grown up to be a nature grazer, but because my family were kind of from older bloodlines, and so they were kind of connected more to certain things. Like my mom had this growing things medicine, right? Where she could grow like a zucchini plant in desert sand taller than a person, those kinds of things. But so early on, she was always feeding us out of the garden or the areas where she was growing things. So I ended up being kind of a connoisseur of all kinds of vegetation. And now that I'm older, especially going to herbal medicine school, some of those plants I'm pretty sure that I ate are probably poisonous or would be considered by science, to be poisonous. However, I've developed this thing in my life as growing up is that if I'm around a certain kind of plant, and say I'm little, I'm not saying that people should, bet the horse on this one, right? But this is just a feeling I have and what I've come to realize in my own life. But when I was really, really little, these plants that were around me didn't want to kill me. You know what I mean? Because I was just a baby, and they look after me. You know what I mean? They, like the insects too, they looked after me when I was little. I remember. And the plants looked after me. So I have this belief system that also, if you needed the plant, you were around the plant for a certain period of time, that it would change itself to do you good and be beneficial, even if it was poisonous. But it would depend a lot about your relationship to nature, your relationship to yourself. And I think the more innocent you are, the more littler you are, I think that this works better, because, you know, your offspring, and they have to teach you and help you develop. But I'm pretty sure that I've had some poisonous plants when I was little, and that I didn't die from it. And I think it's because they grew close to my family, and they grew close to me. And they would have, if they would have seen me coming at them to eat them, they may have decided, you know, to try to tranquil their medicine, you know, so that it was not so harmful. So I'm always astonished, you know, they go in the forest and all these other places and people die of starvation and stuff. And there's so much food that you can eat in the forest or that is medicinal. It just shocks me. And so it's like shocking to me nowadays how anyone could die in a forest, you know, because if you had a good relationship with nature, you were non-predatorial. That's the big thing. Plants don't like when they're living out there in nature, and they have some of these people, like say from Patagonia, going in to extract invasive species out of their area, and they see you coming with shovels. They don't really like that. They don't really like that kind of energy. You know, it bothers them, kind of a thing. So I've seen that happen. I've seen people go in, and so I don't collect plant medicine in there for a while, because, you know, the plants were terrified. You know what I mean? Kind of had stress. Yeah. But yeah, and so what are your thoughts about plants being able to change their chemistry at will because of your relationship to them? Do you have any thoughts?
It's something that I tell people about only if it's someone like you, because otherwise they'll look at me really funny and not know what I just said. But I fully agree with you, and I fully believe that plants can do that. They can feel the energy field, the auras that we have. All of our energy is connected to everything else. They can pick up on it, and most of the scientific community will not tell you, or they've not really cared to look into, that the metaphysical realm that we are all a part of, that basically the native people are very deeply tied into, they've always been. That metaphysical realm also affects and jurisdicts reality itself, the physical realm too. All plants have the capability of changing their chemicals within themselves. They can become toxic if they're not toxic. Lima beans, for instance, if a predator is eating on a lima bean plant, it will, or if it senses a predator, even if it's not eating on it, it will tell the plant, or the plant will start encoding itself to create the chemicals that end up filling the plant with cyanide. Which is why we have to cook lima beans, because if we don't tend them properly, they will become very toxic. But I believe that plants can read the energy that we give out, and they will change their whole chemistry according to that. There's a lot of plants that out there, like in the food, or in a forest, not in the food, in the forest, that, like you said, people can live in the forest and there's no reason they should starve, because the forest is filled with edible things. And I think the real problem is that a lot of people that end up starving and dying out in the forest or in these natural settings is that they're so far removed from the natural world that they don't realize that berry bush right over that little hill over there is probably screaming at them to say, "Hey, eat me, you'll be okay." They're not open enough. They don't know enough about nature, and they don't want to. They kind of have this, I don't want to say urbanized mindset, but I guess that's really what in a way it is. There's a lot of plants that grow around here and up in Pennsylvania that are considered extremely toxic. Black nightshade is usually said by science to be extremely toxic. But if you get the berries at the proper time, and like we were talking, I also think if you're gentle and understanding with the plant, you can eat the berries and you'll be perfectly fine. But if you suddenly dart toward the plant holding a shovel or something or herbicide, the plant is going to know that, and it's going to end up making itself more toxic just because it perceives it as a threat. People don't necessarily understand sometimes or realize that science has always said that plants are not really quote unquote living. They're living, but they're not like us. They're not like a dog or something. But in the honest sense, they are. They are just as alive as we are. They have their own heartbeat. They have their own brain. They have their own way of telling us stuff and doing everything. So I firmly agree that what we put out to a plant, or even an animal in that sense, would change its chemistry, change its perception of us, and it'll react accordingly, because reaction is part of the natural order. So again, all the more reason why to be careful with what you do, because again, you get what you put out. You get back what you put out or put in that sense.
Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. That's why I like talking to you, because, and this guy, native guy Grayson, going through that climax forest, I just really loved his philosophy, and his philosophy is like your philosophy and my philosophy, kind of a thing, and probably some other people's philosophy, just about, where we're at, where we need to head, and doing all these things. So something kind of came to me that made me really sad. I was thinking about okay, so we have all these plants right now. So you probably know who, I had him a couple of times on my show, but he gets really busy. And he lives up in that community, so I think it's hard for him to actually be on my radio show too as well. Greg Schoen. But one of the things he said a long time ago on my show was that he believed that from his experience in growing native seeds, been gifted native seeds to carry on, he said that if we get enough of this, stuff, these indigenous seeds into nature, that it has all of the codes and everything in it, that it actually will transform and change everything. And I learned that from just the few stalks of that native corn I grew. It oversaw and ran, a 5-mile radius of all different kinds of plants and how it impacted them and changed them, kind of a thing. So number one on that, what's your thought about that? And then number two, I was thinking about, wow, no wonder nature really, it's not that nature hates us. It's that nature is, I think, confused about us as modern people, doesn't really understand us. And so it is kind of stands off a little bit until you show it that, you want to communicate with it. But I was thinking about oh my God. So, the program is change the food and GMO the food or hybrid the food, genetically modified in a way that it kills people. And you think about what you really have to do to the genetic, and spiritual drive of a plant. The plant wants to love humans, right? It wants to love everything in its environment, including each other. It wants to give and take and have, these beautiful relationships with, the sun, the water, the soil, everything around it. It wants to generate life. All life is generated from it. There isn't anything you can't make that you can't grow from a plant. So it has, like, out of all the things on the planet, plants, trees, or whatever else are, like, really, really you not want to love, but be part of the oneness and working together. So in order to genetically modify it in a way that it starts to kill life, it kills animals, it kills people, it kills insects. Like, you really have to do a psychological, psychiatric, fry it's everything in it on all levels to make it turn so severely against its own nature and then harm everything. I mean, that's brutal.
Yeah, that's a level of evil that, and oddly enough, right before you called me, I was doing some research because I'm in the process of writing another novel. And I was reading up on Bayer, since they're the ones that, for those that may be listening that don't know, Bayer, as in Bayer aspirin, that pharmaceutical company has now acquired the seed corporation Monsanto. They're now one. And I was reading into all of this secret intelligence stuff that they're doing. They're spying on people. They're trying to pay people off. And just also they can remain greedy, which is, they're corrupt and very greedy, which is the problem. And they're the people, like you said, that are genetically modifying stuff that we consume. And I agree with Greg, first and foremost. He's a dear friend of mine. And for those people that may be listening that know about the glass gem corn that was bred by Carl Barnes, Greg was best friends with Carl, and a lot of his native seed came from what Carl had collected. And it goes back to the whole metaphysical realm thing I was saying. I've come to realize that the plants physically communicate through their roots, through the fungi that are underground, that are in the roots. They all interconnect the whole ecosystem. Plants communicate like that, but they also communicate on a spiritual, energy-based level. And like that corn that you planted that affected the neighbors, the corn knew that the neighbors were problematic, and they gave off just the right vibration to cause more, I don't want to say anger, but cause more chaos enough to drive the source of it away so things could be peaceful. It's like you said, all plants, all animals, all life, it just wants to be our friend. It's our family. They're our brothers and sisters too. They want peace. They want quiet. They want unity. They're like people that are born as a Libra, which I am. They are the peacekeepers. They want to bring back that equilibrium. They want to balance everything because that's the way the world used to be. So plants can give off energy and other physically chemical reactions and signs that tell a plant next door that, well, I'm being eaten by this. You should re-encode yourself to be toxic now. But they can also tell each other through a metaphysical way that maybe, hey, the neighbor next door is not someone that is going to make this place a good community. We should try to bring the balance back and do what we need to do to put them off of this land. So really, plants and animals and nature itself, it's really here for us. and it always has been. And, of course, humanity, even some native peoples, we drove quite a few things to extinction. We were not perfect, but I think nature knows that, and is accepting of that. But the current rate of destruction that we're doing, I do think nature is very confused. It is basically acting as an abuse victim. It's hard for it to trust anyone or anything. It doesn't really know who to turn to in some senses. But at the same time, it also knows the people that are causing problems, and it knows the people that it can reach out to, like people like you and I, and probably a lot of our listeners, to help it stay strong, to help it heal. And all of this genetic modification that has been going on, it's one of the most evil things I think that we as humans can do to the natural world. We are literally taking the spirit out of the plant. And of course, that also takes out the nutritional value as well, most of the time. But one of the Pawnee seed keepers that I know, she told me when I was talking to her a few years ago that she's like, well, this is why my people and a lot of the other natives, as you probably know, don't like what all of this genetic modification is doing. Not only do these corporations steal our seed and end up copyrighting it when it was never meant to be copyrighted. The whole world owned it. It wasn't just that corporation. And she said they take the spirit out of corn, out of beans, whatever they end up genetically modifying. And this is where we run into a very bigger problem. It's because, like you said, the plants cannot help heal us. They cannot communicate anymore. They are basically a zombified, synthetic creation that is only programmed to produce more seed, more fruit, bigger fruit. And they're not even really part of the natural ecosystem anymore. They're part of this fake, faux, zombie, apocalyptic worldview that, where we are trying to do whatever we can to erase the natural world because we think we don't need it, and we do. And we're trying to be, or at least, especially the GMO corporations, they are trying to be mother. And I always tell people that no one but mother can be mother. There is no human that can ever be, that can ever try to do what nature does herself. She is the best one that can do it. And all the other forces to help govern the life and the spiritual realms upon this planet and other in the universe itself. So when they're genetically altering all of this stuff, it not only destroys the spirit, because the spirit is what has connected us to life on this planet for so long, but it also ends up causing the plants to not be nutritious. They end up changing the entire genetic structure, and they don't ever think of what that could do to people. So it basically just gives them this synthetic thing that is just a human-created zombified mess that really has no viable use in the world, especially if we're wanting more medicines in the world and everything. And to me, if we can plant more indigenous seed, more native plants, we can recreate and restore the equilibrium that we've lost. We have to balance more of the good so it'll counteract the bad. Well, at least that's the way I perceive it. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. So we have like about 20 minutes, but I wanted to tell you about what happened the other day, because I don't get to talk to you very much, but only when I can corner you on my radio show. But I was out collecting. So this time of year, I collect sagebrush for smudge because that's what's in my area. My teachers always taught me to work with the medicines that I'm around, so I make smudge wands, but I wait till the sagebrush flowers. And then, then I collect it. So in the fall, I usually collect it when it's really strong. It has a really strong, beautiful smell, and it looks beautiful. And then when you wrap it, it looks just so beautiful. And I've added different plants into it before, but this year I decided I was going to wrap with mullein too. I found these mullein plants that had the hugest leaves on them. And so they were like the size of the sagebrush. And so I could, make these beautiful wands. And I thought, well, it's also a disinfectant. It's super good for your lungs. And if you use it in the house, with your smudge, it can actually help to clean up a lot of viral stuff, right? That you would get respiratorily. Mm-hmm. And then I put a few little mugwort in it. Mugwort is a new plant that I learned about this year. I watched some ceremonies recently where the natives use it, in the lodge and things like that. So it was a new plant. But when I was out collecting a couple days ago, because I go to different areas, to get what I need, and I put it together usually there and then hang them. And then, so when I was there, what happened was that there were a couple of these sagebrush plants in this one area that I was at a couple of days ago. And they were talking to me that they were worried. It's the first time that I've ever felt anything from sagebrush other than I'm here, I'm old, I'm going to stay here, not afraid, not just kind of like really sagebrush just has this really strong warrior energy about it, right? If it gets really mad at things, it will be toxic to chase them away, like immediately, like it won't let things grow around it. So the first time that I ever was collecting it where it was like the sagebrush was talking to me about the environment, and I was looking at some of them and they've changed in really odd ways. Like the sagebrush actually all over this whole area, the places I was collecting have a very strange look to it. I can tell that it's different. Something is going on. It's the first time that it's ever talked to me about that it's nervous. It's nervous about its future, actually. I was kind of shocked. I was just kind of like taken back. And so one of the things that I actually learned from this collection of smudge is in the past, you always wrap it with the prayers. My prayer is always thank you, 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 thank you. That's the only thing, the only, prayer I try to hold. But this year, sagebrush just said, let's do this, and I wanted me to collect a lot of it, so because it really needed to communicate right with everything around it. And then I realized, like, I don't really need to put any kind of prayers and any kind of smudge that I'm going to use, because the plants already know what the prayers are. They know that I'm going to be coming to those areas to collect, so they've already been pulling together, the prayers of their community of what's needed. My job is just to harvest those prayers and then put them together and then use them, utilize their prayers to help prayers be released. That I'm just the steward, right? Like, I'm not really doing anything. They're doing all the work. I'm just preparing for that work to be done, kind of a thing. And that was kind of a big, aha moment, was I'm just collecting their prayers, Like, even when I'm making medicine and tinctures and stuff like that, I'm just collecting their prayers, and they can do the work. They're doing the work, and I'm just learning how to help them to do their work, to facilitate it and prepare it, kind of a thing. But it was just one of those kind of moments. But I was really upset about the sagebrush, that they're concerned about what's going on. They're taking notice all of a sudden. Do you have any experience like that with being out, like, or anything that's like it?
It's more so when I go to the farm that I grew up on here, that is actually where I'm at now, after coming back home. All around it is this civilization. There's we used to be the only people that lived here, and now there's about 3 subdivisions that I've gone in. There's apartments that I've went in. And every time I go into the back of the farm or something, it's peaceful, but I can sense that the entire ecosystem is like the sagebrush. It's very nervous what's going to happen to it. It's unsure what will happen. And even a lot of these heirlooms that I've been growing, especially the corn and a lot of the other plants that are being genetically modified, they know that their kind is being altered. And a lot of some of these corns I've grown, some of the beans and everything, they've expressed to me a genuine worry of what is happening in the world. They know that they are being genetically eroded in their native ecosystems, in their native regions, and they don't want to go extinct. But at the same time, they know that I'm trying to do all I possibly can to keep them going, and keep them to prevent that extinction, and teach more people about stuff like we've been talking about. So usually I get good energy from the plants I work with, but there are times when I've planted something and I've been upset, and I wasn't even thinking at the time. I'm like, well, this just needs to be planted, and I'll plant it, and it'll end up being kind of a sore spot in the garden from then on because of that energy it gives off. Or if something is extremely concerned about something that's happening across the street or something, then it'll tell me. But usually it's good things that I get, but sometimes I can just feel the pain and the hurt that that the natural world is experiencing, and it really gets me down sometimes. But I'm thinking, well, there are people that still care. There are people like us that are trying to do what we can to save what is left and prevent further damage and extinction of anything. In general, it's not necessarily heirlooms. It's all life itself. So it just depends on the plants, really. Most of what I have experience with they're pretty happy. They enjoy having me around because we talk, and I just let them do what they want to do because I'm like, that's what you've done for thousands of years. Why should I bother?
Yeah, I'm helping you. I'm your helper.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'll do what you need. Just tell me. Like, you've survived for thousands of years. Like, I'm not going to bother that.
Yeah, you're the wise one. I know very little. Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So we have like about, I thank you so much. I really, really appreciate having this conversation about nature that a lot of people don't really understand and maybe don't know about and don't value. So many people that I know, may be really conscious, but they don't really understand some of the things that are going on, especially with nature. And so I really appreciate you being really wide open, and having a conversation about this topic, which I think is a really awesome topic, about plants, and that, I love what you said, that they have a spirit and they have a heart and they have a mind, and, they have, I just really love that. I could see this little heart in there beating,
Yeah, me too.
So with the last few minutes that we have, probably like about 10 minutes or so, we'll close down about 54 minutes, the end of the show. But is there anything that, you didn't get a chance to talk about that you thought maybe you might want to talk about, or that you want to bring to the attention of people at this point?
Not offhand, I don't think. Other than my usual message of just people, even if it's a flower or something, just buy some flower seed, go buy a plant or something, and grow your own stuff. It's a journey. It's always been a journey. It's one of the most favorite things. I love planting stuff and watching it grow and learning the lessons that the things teach me. And an even bigger message that I'm trying to get, not only into Roughwood, but just in general, is that if any of you listening have children or you're a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle of someone that does have children, please see to it that they get involved in the natural world, that they grow their own stuff. Just get them out there, because we're losing that, and more young people need to be actively involved in nature and food, because they are the people that all of these burdens and worries are going to end up laying on. So just try to get them out in the garden, get them out in nature, go to a park, go to a national forest or something, and just get them more involved into the natural world and in the garden, because I think that's really what the world needs right now. We need more people like that.
Well, that's super good advice. So tell everybody where they can find you or information that's coming out, and then, maybe about where to find your books, websites. So you want to give people a run at that as well, so they can find you before we head off?
On Instagram, I am at Maize Shaman, Maize, and then Shaman, Shaman. On Facebook, I am hashtag or / WHTE Wolf 96, I believe it is. And then for us at Roughwood, which is the organization that I currently work for, we are www.roughwoodtable.org, ROUGHWOOD. And then table.org. A lot of the books that our founder, William Woys Weaver, the father of the heirloom seed movement, his books, we have them for sale. His heirloom vegetable gardening, we have a few copies left of. And a lot of my books, we will be selling. My corn book that I am looking to hopefully rewrite for next year. You can find it on Amazon. It is called Maize, Roots, Shoots, and Moccasin Boots. And hopefully the next edition will be out maybe next year, if I can find the time that I don't have to write the second edition and have it published. And then hopefully my new website will be out next year as well. Just depends on how things go. So feel free to find me on any of the social media, shoot us an email, send me a friend request or something, follow request, whatever. I think that's about it. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and he and I are on the Facebook page, Seeds of Preservation.
Oh, yeah. Seeds of Preservation Independent, Sophie, yes.
Yeah, because then you can see pictures of the seeds that he's involved in, and sometimes there's beautiful stories that he puts with the seeds too on that page, those are my favorite, is when you post and then there's this beautiful story that goes along with it, the seed, the story, the colors, so vibrant, a lot of the seeds. All right, so are there any plants that you're working with right now? Because you were talking about, not putting you on the spot since we have just about 6 minutes, but when you're talking a lot, you were saying that you kind of have a little bit, you're fighting depression and just your moods and things like that. Are there any plants right now that you're working with specifically that you feel that are helping you with that, or that they're helping give you information about how to work with it within yourself? Anything specific for people out there, just so the people can hear about it?
Obviously corn. Really, truthfully, corn can probably cure just about anything, to be honest. It's the one that I'm very closest to. So it's one that I've been actively working with. But I've also found that some of the herbs that are traditionally used to treat anxiety and depression, like ashwagandha, passion flower, lemon balm, mugwort, things like that, they've also been starting to kind of communicate with me, and there's something that I want to more actively get into growing next year. But I think really for anyone that wants to try to get into having a a plant guide, I guess is what I would call them. It's more so just feeling, meditate, see what comes to you. Or if you're out in the garden, probably whatever plant you're most attracted to is probably the one that is meant for you, or the one's meant for you. But corn for me has always been something. Sunflowers also this year, they've helped to kind of brighten and liven me up, get me out of these dim, dark holes I sometimes get in. So I don't know. It's just whatever has been kind of coming to me at the time. I've always loved sunflowers, so I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
All right, well, that's good information. I was thinking about, one of the things that I'm learning in the summer too about herbs and plants is subtleties, and especially plants that are kind of grown in a kind of a more natural type environment. And what happened was we were on a walk. We're going up through the Sierra Nevadas, and my teacher stopped at this one plant, Angelica, actually, and was talking about how, a lot of Native people have used the root for the dance, right? When they're doing dance and ceremony, and because it helps with the endurance and it helps with stamina to keep dancing. Even though like you may be doing ceremonial and you haven't had a lot of water and you haven't had a lot of food and you've been dancing for several days straight, and that the angelical root helps to kick it up. So anyway, she took some leaves off this plant and handed them to us, so we can smell them, and we look at them and check the texture, and sometimes, they're edible, so we eat them. And so I took this clump and I macerated it with my fingers, and I stuck it in my chest, in my bra. And I like to stick stuff in there because it heats up, and then I can smell it. You know what I mean? I can smell it kind of like the plant. Yep. So like wild rose flowers, I'll stick down there. It's like natural aromatherapy. Plus, if I put plants in there in that area, I'll find out if I'm allergic to them or not. Because if I get a rash, then I know not to mess with that plant, right? Because I don't agree with it. But anyway, so I had it down there, and we're hiking, and I'm hot, and it's off-gassing, Angelica, leaf smells, and all this other. And then about, 40 minutes later, literally in the group, I start coughing. It's like a major cat fur ball, like people want to pound me on the back. They're like, are you choking on your saliva? I'm like, no. Anyway, so then I, cough up, literally, I'm hoarse. I cough up this major fur ball. And so I'm looking through my notes. I'm going back through my notes while we're standing there listening to the lecture. And I'm trying to find what plant, out of the last 15 that we've looked at that I may have eaten or something, ingested, that would have was a lung thing, that would have made me cough that up. And then nothing was there. And then I looked under Angelica, and one of the statements she made about it was, helps you to catch your breath. And I was like, well, there it is. It's like, it's just in between it's heating up in my chest. It's going into my bloodstream, and it's already affecting my lungs from the outside. It's not smoking because that plant was like, knew what was going on in those lungs in that area that were keeping me from being able to fully catch my breath and having stamina, and you know what I mean? And a lot of these things that are correlate with the lungs. But I was, even though I believe in a lot of this stuff, it really kind of shook me. I was like, it's that powerful that you could just have it on your skin if you're really in an open plane of, your existence, and it actually, you won't have to do anything with it, but just put it on your skin. You could like sit next to it and have it touch you, and it could radically change the health of your body. It's an astounding thing.
There's times I'm like you, I believe this stuff, but when it actually happens, it really shakes me up, and it makes me that much more of a believer. But at the same time, it's like, wow, I didn't even ingest this like you usually are supposed to. It has this much power just by touching me. Like it's astounding.
Yeah, no, it just really rocked me. I mean, really rocked me. And so, keep going down the rabbit hole and more in the rabbit hole. And it makes me want to be out in nature, touching everything more.
Yeah.
Because
I'm like that anyway.
Some days like you, I just feel like, life can be like sometimes too tough of a hurdle to jump, and what's going on and why am I here? And, I get out in those plants and it really kind of changes me, in a huge way. So anyway, we're at the end of the show, last few minutes going on. Hey, thank you so much for coming on. Again, everybody, this was Stephen Smith, and he is amazing. Find him at Roughwood, what is it, Roughwood.org? Table.org.
Yeah, roughwoodtable.org.
Yeah, and anyway, so this has been Carrying Stones and Digging Holes radio show. This is your Saturday version, and we've been talking about all things plants and what's going on with our world and where we're at with the world, and hopefully we gave you a lot of things to think about. And I will be back Wednesday for the Wednesday edition of Carrying Stones and Digging Holes on Studio A at noon Eastern Standard Time with yet another. I'll be at. Nope, I don't know. Let's see what the amazing guest is for next week. It looks like it's going to be a friend of mine, Kelsey Sweet. All right, everybody. Thank you, Stephen, for coming on. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so
much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
All right, everybody. See you next Wednesday. Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.